All right, guys. So, like I've been telling you, there is the blame game going around between the moderate and progressive Democrats in regards to who's at fault for what happened in Virginia. Now, our number one squad member / socialist in Congress, AOC, has spoken out, right, to let us know her bright ideas in regards to why the Democrats lost Virginia. And AOC came out and argued that the Democrats lost because they were too moderate. Take a look.
Plus, on the election front, I actually think we have good news as well. I know that Virginia was a huge bummer, and honestly, if anything, I think that the results show the limits of trying to run a fully 100% super moderated campaign that does not excite, speak to, or energize a progressive base. And frankly, we weren't even really invited to contribute on that race.
So AOC says that the Democrats lost because they were too moderate, right? And this is why, I enjoy the infighting between the Democrats, and I'm listening to them go back and forth about why they lost. And I'm like, both sides here, you're both wrong, right? You're both not really trying to acknowledge the real issue. But this conversation is more about the progressives, because the progressives don't realize that, one, I don't really believe that most of the country wants their far left socialist policies, right? They say, well, our policies poll individually, they poll well. Well, some individual policies might poll well, depending on how you frame it. However, that doesn't mean that the American people want all of them at the same time wrapped up in a $3.5+ trillion package, right? So they're convinced that, well, if you run our progressive economic campaign, right, if you solely just focus on our progressive economic policies, then that automatically means that we'll win. That automatically means that we'll win, right? And they're convinced that the only reason they lost is because Biden didn't do his Build Back Better plan, right? That's what they're convinced about. When the reality of the situation is that America literally voted back in November not to have a $3.5 trillion Build Back Better plan. You know why? Because the Senate is a 50-50 Senate, right? It's a 50-50 Senate. The only reason Democrats have the majority is because Kamala Harris is vice president, and that's how the Senate works, right? The vice president is the tiebreaker. So with that being said, at a Senate level, the American people literally voted for moderation, right? They voted for moderation. They didn't vote for far left progressive policies. If that's what they wanted, they would have 55, 60 Democrat senators, right? 60 would really be, in my opinion, the sweet spot for you to say, okay, yes, this is what America wants, right? They want far left agenda, right? But they don't have that. In the House, they barely have a slim majority there as well, right? So in the Senate and the House, they barely have slim majorities, which tells you that the American people literally do not want this far left socialist agenda. But for whatever reason, they are convinced that this is what people want. And every single time the Democrats lose, the progressives say, well, you lost because you didn't go far left enough, right? Matter of fact, I want you guys to actually listen to Kyle Kalinske, who's a progressive talk show host, talk about why he thinks that the Democrats lost Virginia. Take a look.
So Glenn Youngkin, who won't lift a finger to help working people and regular Americans, his argument is, hey, Terry McAuliffe is pushing this critical race theory nonsense, which is sectarianism, which is racist, which is anti-white, and this stuff is crazy. Man, they should stop doing this. So he just changed the conversation to some culture war bullshit, and Terry McAuliffe was like, yeah, let's fight about this. Why? Why would you fight about that? And why would your message be Trump bad when Trump's not even in office anymore? Woo, buckle up, baby. The midterms are going to be a bloodbath, son. The fact of the matter is this. The only way out for Democrats, and even this is a Hail Mary, pass the full $3.5 trillion bill with all of the popular provisions. On top of that, do another round of stimulus checks or eliminate all student loan debt through executive order, which Biden has the authority to do, but he just doesn't want to do, or legalize marijuana, or a mix of those things, or all of those things. And then even then, you'd have to brag about your accomplishments from right now until the election. And even then, you might still lose because you didn't do any voting rights reform or gerrymandering reform. So now Republicans have like a plus 6 point advantage no matter what. So even if you do all those popular things and you brag about those popular things and you move the needle in your direction, which you would if you did those things, you might only pick up, 5 more points. And you pick up 5 more points, well, guess what? If you need a 6-point advantage just to hold on to the numbers you have, you're still going to lose seats. The Democrats are pathetic and ineffectual, and FDR's rolling over in his grave right now. He is. He's rolling over in his grave. Unbelievable. Somehow it's the left's fault. Somehow it's the left's fault. Again, the only tiny grain of truth in it is there are many ultra-woke left-wing idiots who will say, yeah, let's fight the culture war all day. Don't listen to them. They're wrong. But don't get it twisted. It is not the left's fault by and large. You know whose fault it is? Corporate Democrats, conservative Democrats. It's the fault of the openly and brazenly corrupt. It's the fault of the people who have not delivered on their promises.
Yeah, so there's some things in there that I actually agree with. Most of it I disagree with, but he does have a point about the whole Trump thing, right? The fact that the Democrats tried to campaign that Glenn Youngkin was Trump was really stupid, because Glenn Youngkin, obviously, he's not embracing Trump, but he's also not denouncing Trump. He's kind of walking a fine line, and it was very obvious that's how he was running his campaign, right? And he did that so he could basically attract moderates to his campaign, and the Democrats kept trying to call him Trump, even though he's obviously not Trump, not in any way, right, to be quite honest with you. But in regards to the rest of what he said, again, it just shows you how these people really have no clue. The problem with the progressives, in particular, progressives like Kyle Kalinske, that don't engage in the culture war, he called it BS, right, is that, again, he thinks that the culture war doesn't matter. He thinks that, well, if we just pass our economic agenda, then everybody's going to love us and we're going to be in office forever. When, in my opinion, I'm not convinced that that's what the American people want. Again, evidenced by how the House is set up, how the Senate is set up, evidenced by the fact that a socialist lost a mayor race in Buffalo to a write-in candidate. Now, the write-in was an incumbent who lost the primary to the socialists, but in the actual general election where you have moderates and people on the right voting, the mayor who was running against a socialist won. And he wasn't really even on the ballot. He was a write-in. Okay? That tells you how much those people reject socialism. And I don't think Buffalo is exactly a right-wing city. And this candidate was endorsed by AOC. Look at New York City. I think what her name, Maya Wiley, was endorsed by AOC. She's a socialist. Lost to a more moderate Democrat, right? Lost to a more moderate Democrat. So again, you can show me polls all day, but look at who people are actually voting for. Bernie Sanders can't win the Democrat primary to save his life, not just because of his policies, but also because of DNC and all the other stuff. But still, I'm just saying, dude hasn't been able to win for a reason. And furthermore, what Kyle Kalinske is missing here is that he's pretending like there's only a small minority of those on the left who are engaging in the culture war, right? There's just a tiny bit of woke revolutionaries, SJWs out there. That doesn't represent most of the progressives, right? That doesn't represent a significant amount of progressives. And I'm like, bruh, the whole liberal mainstream media is engaged in the culture war, right? The whole liberal mainstream media literally has told everybody on the right that your concerns do not matter. Critical race theory is not real. White supremacy is the reason why Glenn Youngkin won. They're engaged in that, right? And we know for sure that a lot of these people in mainstream media are out at progressives like Don Lemon, Joy Reid. They're just flat out progressives. And all the race baiters, they're woke progressives. All of them. And so when you don't acknowledge that exists, again, this is why you're clueless, right? This is why you're clueless. I mean, y'all number one star, AOC, is a culture warrior. Matter of fact, she talked about 2022 and how race and talking about race is going to play an effect into that. Take a look.
I think that we should be worried if nothing changes. And if Democrats don't learn lessons. And I think one thing that moderates need to learn is that whether they want to or not, there's going to be charged discussions about race. So they need to know how to talk about it.
So she's accusing the moderate Democrats of not knowing how to talk about race, right? And her suggestion for them knowing how to talk about race is to talk about race the same way progressives talk about race, which is the actual issue. That is what has supercharged and united the right, essentially, and independence in this country, right? As in this same video, she writes, this, of course, is not the only thing, but it's a big thing. Historically, moderate Democrats have believed that the best way to respond to race baiting by the right is to say little/nothing. We see how that demoralizes the base you're supposed to protect and turn out, while also coding white swing voters to the right with inadequate responses or silence. Okay, first of all, again, these people are clueless. She's accusing the right of race baiting when the right is not race baiting. The only way that the right can respond to anything having to do with race is if the left starts the conversation, because they're the ones accusing the country of being systemically racist and white people are evil and blah, 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 right? Everything that the right says is a response to the left. The right is not starting off the conversation, right? That's what these people don't understand, right? Then she says that the moderate Democrats believe that the best way to respond is to say little or nothing. And I'm like, bro, all they've talked about is race this last 2 years, right? Especially after George Floyd. You had Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, what it was wearing, koofies on the House floor. We had George Floyd tributes. We had George Floyd this, George Floyd that. Black Lives Matter everywhere. All they talked about is race. That's all they've talked about. So when you have progressives like AOC, who's a culture warrior, that comes out here and says, the moderate Democrats, they don't know how to talk about race, when they're literally talking about race the same exact way that the progressives talk about race. Again, it shows that she's clueless, right? She doesn't know what she's talking about. And then you have the progressives that don't necessarily engage in the culture war, pretending like the culture war doesn't matter, right? And that the progressives on the left that are engaged in the culture war, that is only a very small minority. This is why they're lost, right? This is why they're clueless. They have no idea. The reason why is because they pretend and act like they're connected with the everyday American and that they understand what the everyday American is going through and the issues, when they actually don't. They don't understand. They have no clue whatsoever. They think that, well, if you just implement our policies, if you just go far left, then everything is going to be okay. And that's just not how things work. Because regardless of whether or not somebody agrees with you on economic policy, it's going to be really hard to persuade parents to vote for you if you're telling parents that, hey, I don't think that you should have influence in regards to your child's education. You shouldn't have any say over what your child learns in school. You think that, just because the Democrats want to pass some $3.5 trillion spending package that parents are going to overlook the fact that the Democrats also are just over authoritarians. They want to control every aspect of your life just because they want to pass some $3.5 trillion spending package? No, of course they're not. They don't give a damn about that anymore. Because honestly, at the end of the day, that issue, right, is not going to affect them as much as their children's education. It doesn't mean as much to them as their children's education. So again, when you ignore that type of stuff and you say, it doesn't matter, don't talk about it, that again, to me, is bad, right? Terry McAuliffe obviously was terrible. But what Terry McAuliffe should have said, right, if he was smart, is, you know what? Yeah, you're right. Critical race theory, elements of it is in schools, and we need to stop preaching anti-white hatred, right? We need to all come together as Americans and stop focusing on race. If he just would have said that, he probably would have won, right? He probably would have won if he would have said that. But the fact is, he didn't say that. He went all in on the anti-white stuff, talking about we need less white teachers, literally on the last day of his campaign, and then he lost, right? This stuff is not that hard to figure out. I just find it hilarious. The back and forth between the progressives and the moderates, when in my opinion, both of them are wrong, right? Progressives are wrong in the sense that they are the ones that are really striking up these race conversations. They're pushing it the most, the wokest among them. The ones that aren't woke, they don't think it matters, which is wrong, right? And the moderates, they just want to blame racism, right? They just want to blame racism. So, hey, like I said, I'm enjoying the fireworks, but let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.